versus them. While we pay to keep our politicians fighting, how do we, the people, rise up and solve the great challenges of our time? We do it by embracing freedom and liberty. There may be no such thing as a free lunch, but this hour is as close as it gets. Welcome to A Free Solution.
All right, welcome to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson, your host today. Thank you so much for joining us here on this beautiful Monday afternoon. We're live here on WYSL until 2 p.m. Give us a call if you'd like to participate in the show, 585-346-3000. That's 585-346-3000. Or if you're listening online on the Free Solution Facebook page, Free Solution YouTube channel, Free Solution Facebook group, the Kevin Wilson page, or the Kevin Wilson Twitter account, whichever place you're listening today, leave your comments. And if it's good stuff, maybe we'll read down here. Of course, shout out to the folks listening on the podcast as well. Appreciate y'all too. So today we're going to talk about something that just happened this morning too. I was surprised that it happened. I was getting frustrated that it hadn't happened yet. And it's that New York State decided to follow the new CDC guidelines on COVID stuff, right? And, when the new CDC guidelines came out, I think like many folks listening, it's a mixture of like, well, this is good. I'm glad the government agency caught up to how everyone else was kind of acting anyway, based on like, the evidence they had seen. And for me, I was like, now I want New York State to do the same because, now, again, I'm still in the position where my son is in childcare. He's still too young to wear a mask, and the guidelines as they existed would still mean that he might have to quarantine if someone in his class got sick, even if he didn't. And that's, again, especially knowing what the actual danger is to young kids, I was like, well, that's kind of annoying. And New York State hadn't followed any of the new CDC guidelines, and they were still doing a whole bunch of different stuff. And essentially, again, if you haven't checked out what the new CDC stuff does, it doesn't differentiate the behavior of vaccinated versus unvaccinated people, because as we started to see, as new variants pop out and the vaccine being, different levels of effective among different people, it didn't necessarily make sense to treat someone differently because they were vaccinated if they got sick versus someone who got sick and wasn't vaccinated. And I know a lot of folks are looking for a reckoning on that, and we're going to talk about that again. What do you do when government agency or politicians eventually come around to a better position? What level of accountability / encouragement do you give to those folks when they had been making wrong decisions previously, particularly ones where the decision was wrong enough to disrupt education, to hurt the economy, to disrupt people's lives in a way that wasn't necessarily productive, right? And then when do you offer forgiveness because they're erring on the side of safety, or accountability because they failed to look at the evidence as it changed when the rest of us caught up a lot quicker? Is this a matter of the state fail, and by the state I mean both the state government and the federal bureaucracy of the CDC failing to respond quickly to the data or being cautious? So we'll talk through some of that stuff today. So New York State, again, they've adopted now the CDC guidelines, and Governor Hochul's going out and being like, education's important. We want to make sure we update these before the fall. The school year starting in just a couple weeks. So timely announcement on that. But she gets to get out in front of this and say, we're doing this for the children. Once again, for the children. The restrictions are for the children, lifting the restrictions also for the children, to make sure that education isn't disrupted, because we've seen how particularly the COVID guidance related to school children has been particularly disruptive to their lives and to the lives of family of kids who are in school, despite the relative low danger of those kids during this pandemic. Again, most of the danger was for older folks. Not all of it. I know it's a serious thing, but a lot of it was, the more dangerous population to get this skews a bit older as compared to younger. Okay, so Governor Hochul, she gets to go out and be a hero. But again, this isn't something just conservatives have been pressuring her on this point too. I've been seeing a lot of Democrats start to be like, hey, this no longer makes sense. We're not doing this. Our friends aren't doing this. We, are triple vaccinated at this point. We've already had it at this point. At what point do we just say, okay, we have to operate in the same way that we did with the flu, where we just say, we know this is a serious thing that's out there. We know if someone gets sick that they should stay home, and that's a good thing to do. And if anyone starts experiencing symptoms, do that. But the level of seriousness that it is, given what we know now, we have to change our approach. And I know there's still a few diehards out there, right? And I've seen those too. The folks are still like, gosh, we still need to lock down. And you'd think, you might not hear those folks in your circles, but like it's still most definitely a thing. They say, hey, look, we're going back to a big peak again. It's going to be the same winter. It's going to be terrible. It's, it's going to be tens of thousands of cases a day, whatever. It's. I mean, again, we're right now, New York State has a couple thousand new cases a day. 7-day average is 4,900. That's where we are. Again, it's not nothing. 70,000 people died in New York State alone. It is a lot of people. So, okay, plan accordingly. Again, if you're in a high-risk group. But we have this weird situation in New York State where, okay, we're starting to lift it. We may have some folks on the extreme end who are going to try to push the governor back into lockdown soon. She still has the ability to do that. The weirdest thing about this situation to me is that was it a week or two ago? It was August 13th, I think it was when the governor signed a new executive order declaring a state of emergency again for COVID-19. So again, now she's lifting all these restrictions in schools following the CDC recommendation, but still we're under a state of emergency for COVID through September 12th. All right. So which is it? Do we need to be in a state of emergency, or are we continuing to lift restrictions? Is that state of emergency going to continue indefinitely? That's what we need to start asking the governor. When does it end? When does she get to dictate that policy alone? Tim O'Connor asks, what guidance? Removal of all guidance? See, Tim, it depends on how you're phrasing guidance, right? Again, this is Tim O'Connor on Facebook, who we do our show Thursday evenings too. If you guys, we had a good one on digital privacy and a whole bunch of other stuff last Thursday. Make sure you check it out. But to me, what the CDC should and ought to be doing is just provide guidance, not mandates. There's a difference, right? There's a difference between saying this is what the data says is likely to keep you safe and protected in these situations based on the knowledge we have at hand. That is different from the state, the governor's office, are declaring an emergency and closing these businesses because of a pandemic emergency. That is different from kinds. Or we, the state, are mandating that the schools take X, Y, and Z measures, and including random testing, including removal of, quarantining of an entire classroom, including, all mandatory masking, all that sort of stuff. That is different from, hey, if you're feeling sick, it's fine if you wear a mask, and that might be encouraged, but you are not required to do that. Those are two different things, right? If the CDC can recommend all they want, and if they want to build that credibility back, because they ruined it in many ways over the last few years, the best thing that they can do is say, here's the data, here's what the evidence supports. Don't get mixed up in the politics of it, and just give people the truth as much as you know it. And then say, based on also the evidence, we're going to make this recommendation. And then it is up to you to do that. And if they can't get enough people to follow that, they need to build that trust back. Because unfortunately, the government's gotten too comfortable with, well, if they're not going to comply with our nice suggestion, then we'll do it by force. and that builds resentment. It builds mistrust. It also encourages them to not sharpen their arguments as much as they could, or to tell noble lies, which is what they did at the beginning of the pandemic, where they said, don't mask, because they wanted the medical industry to be able to get the masks that they knew that they needed. That noble lie has caused so much damage to the reputation of public health here in the United States. And several other things too. Again, there's so many instances in which, if they were straightforward and honest about what was going on, it wouldn't create the same level of mistrust that happened. And Tom Queter on Facebook says, "Wait, people don't trust our government? Shocker." Yeah, no, that's true. It is true. Some people don't trust the government. Tim O'Connor says, "I'm afraid that the CDC has become politicized." Yeah, it kind of has. And again, they need some accountability. And when we come back, we're going to talk about that accountability, right? Again, when someone shifts to a position that is incorrect to a position that is more correct, how do we deal with that? And how do we hold people accountable for their mistakes while also encouraging them to adopt the right thing? Thanks again for joining us here at A Free Solution. If you want to weigh in this, give us a call, 585-346-3000. That's 585-346-3000. We'll be back in just a few minutes here on A Free Solution.
Your business relies on computers and technology to operate. Slow, unreliable networks and servers can cause unplanned downtime and affect your bottom line. The experts at Simple Tech Innovations are here to help. Their preventative maintenance program ensures that your computers and network are kept up to date and monitored for any issues, keeping your business running smoothly. They also help clients achieve HIPAA, PCI, and New York State cybersecurity compliance to keep your network safe and secure. Whatever your business IT needs are, Simple Tech Innovations should be your first call. They've won the Best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. Call them today for a free consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. Simple Tech Innovations.
Hey, this is Kevin Wilson, host of A Free Solution. You ever needed a tool for just one project, but didn't want to spend the cash for something you'd use just once or twice? Well, there's a new tool library in Rochester where you can borrow just the thing you need instead of buying a new one. It's called the Tool Shed from the Southeast Area Coalition, and membership starts at just $25 a year. Use it for home projects or to support your business. Learn more and become a member at seektoolshed.org. That's SEAC toolshed.org.
Only available in the WISL store at WISL1040.com. Official top quality tees, hoodies, and coffee mugs depicting the colorful WISL logo, or the already famous Mount Worstmore line of merch depicting Mount Rushmore style, are for worst presidents. Of course, you know who is front and center up on that mountain. WISL official items make perfect gifts, or they're a great way for you to make a personal statement. Locally produced and sold only in the WISL store at WISL1040.com.
A Free Solution on the WYSL stations.
Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson, your host for today. Thanks so much for joining us today on this beautiful Monday. You can give us a call if you want to participate in the show, 585-346-3000. That's 585-346-3000. We're talking about New York State adopting the new CDC guidance, and again, where do you hold folks accountable for these things? And Tim O'Connor on Facebook also pointed out that Dr. Fauci resigned. Well, he's retiring. He's resigning from his government position at the end of the year in December, right? So he's still in there right now. He didn't quit immediately, unless there's some news that happened since I started the show, which maybe. But as I understood it, he was going to be done at the end of the year. So again, same with him, same with the CDC, same with Kathy Hochul and the New York State public health apparatus. When they come around this stuff, and I'll say this, right? I've said this before, I'm a little bit forgiving of, in early situations, of being a little bit more lenient on folks who are making public health decisions, who don't fully know how dangerous the disease is, who, given the best evidence at the time, at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, it seemed far more dangerous than it ended up being. And it is still, in its own way, extremely dangerous and can harm a lot of people. It's killed, it's what, like 1 million people at this point. It's a lot of folks who have died of this. It's a big deal. But at the beginning of the pandemic, right, you don't know what groups are most vulnerable. You don't know exactly how it's spread. You don't know what's the best way of preventing this. You don't have any sort of vaccine that could, in theory, protect you. You don't have any of this stuff, right? So, okay, I'm a little bit more forgiving of folks who are like, we don't know this, and it seems really dangerous. And the initial, numbers coming out were like, oh, hey, like 20% of people are getting it. Who are getting it are dying. The case fatality rate seemed very high. All right, given that information, which was skewed because it was hitting an older population, it seems prudent to act in a drastic way. But we figured out shortly thereafter, here's what works, here's what doesn't work. Started to figure out, well, what kind of masking works versus doesn't work. What is social distancing make sense? Does cleaning everything obsessively make sense? And then there's the whole vaccine debate, right? Like it's complicated stuff. I'm willing to have a little bit of grace, but there comes a point in which you say, okay, are you perpetuating this because of politics? Are you perpetuating this stuff? And that's what, like, the thing that rubs me the wrong way about Dr. Fauci, and there's, it interesting, and we got a comment from Paula on Facebook who says, Fauci did 50 years in government, interesting what his legacy will be looking back. It's an interesting legacy of what he's done with AIDS, what he's done with COVID, and a whole bunch of different things. And again, you try to say, okay, here's what's known, here's what's the best recommendation given incomplete information, here's what's and then how do we adjust that based on that? And again, politicians get into a momentum. They don't want to look like they've changed their mind because it makes it seem like they are ill-informed or weak. And I do think that there should be some level of forgiveness for that, for making the best decision based on the best data you had at the time. And then when you get new data, changing those decisions, changing those policies. I would always lean towards liberty every single time, but I at least get why politicians acted the way they did in the beginning. I don't get why New York State has stuck with bad information all the way through mid-2022. Again, I'm glad they changed it. I'm glad they're going in a better direction now. I'm glad that school children won't have to face these ridiculous rules. But if Governor Hochul still has emergency powers and she extends them again after September 12th, and cases start rising again in the fall, and there's political pressure once again to respond in an aggressive way that ends up with shutdowns, that ends up with school children having to face ridiculous rules, that ends up with more damage to people's lives, more isolation, that's a problem. We're not taking away those powers. So I want to go with two things, and I'm going to get to this other comment from Tim O'Connor too. He says, Tim O'Connor on Facebook says, you give them the benefit of the doubt. I used to. Incompetence is malice when it comes to politicians. And let me say this. I will give people the benefit of the doubt in the beginning when they're acting on the best information possible, right? And I agree with the second half of the statement. Incompetence is malice when it comes to politicians, that there's so many regulations out there. There's so many things out there where politicians can and should do better. They can and should trust the people to be able to act independently in a rational way for their own needs and their own lives, in which they impose authoritarian measures to control our lives that are neither helpful nor moral, right? And again, by that I mean some of the COVID stuff, but there's all sorts of regulations where they think that they know how to run their lives better than you, and they don't fully understand the nature of the businesses that they're regulating, the behaviors that they're regulating. We see all sorts of stuff with gun regulations that happen. Incompetence and and willful ignorance, again, which especially becomes the case with gun legislation, is not an excuse. It's not a reason to give them a pass. And not knowing information and acting in good faith when no one knows what's going on is a bit different. And I measure politicians by how quickly they correct that when they realize they have the wrong information. And they realize, oh, I have the wrong position. And do they have the fortitude? Do they have the courage to say, you know what? I was wrong about this thing. New data's come to light. This is how we're going to move forward. And here's my reasons why. But so many politicians are terrified of that in part because voters will hold them accountable for it. They'll say, well, you were wrong and you should have known better, and we're going to roast you for it. And sometimes it's totally fair. And other times I'm like, well, they came around to the right side. It's a good thing. So I'm not there with Kathy Hochul, though. Again, she should have known better much sooner. For me, she could have changed her policy like a year and a half ago. We knew better way back when. And New York State wasn't even as bad as other states like California. We knew that we could have tackled this effectively, particularly in the education realm, in regards to COVID, so much more effectively, and let children continue to go to school, not get isolated, not get behind. And then on top of that, make it difficult for people to choose education alternatives in New York State, which is a whole other can of worms. But again, I don't always give people the benefit of the doubt just when I think that they're acting on good information. That's a judgment call. That's an individual situation. I can't apply a blanket solution, a blanket judgment on politicians or anyone who has to make a tough call when it comes to trying to do the most good for the most people. Again, and I might not necessarily agree with the reasons for doing that, the utilitarian reasons. I get sometimes, but other times I tend to err on the side of liberty, of when you don't know what's going on, it's better to allow people the freedom to act because they'll come up with good, effective solutions, good ways of keeping people safe, because everyone else is also analyzing this data and trying to make good decisions that fit for their situation. And you can go back, we got the archives way back, April of 2020. I was saying the same thing. Been pretty consistent about that. But I understand the utilitarian approach. I get it. It's just that they needed to fix it way sooner. They needed to correct their actions way sooner. Governor Hochul signing a new COVID emergency order, not great. The CDC needs massive reform. Again, I think that a lot of what the CDC does could absolutely be privatized. And by which I mean, if my vision for the CDC is that they should be providing guidance to folks, why does that need to be a government agency? Why can't that be a consortium of different healthcare providers who are doing research and providing best practices? And there could be competing consortiums too who are also doing that, and they're trying to vie for what is the best, most realistic, most effective solutions to the big health problems we face today. Again, can the CDC, given its current politicization, given its slow and bureaucratic response to COVID, given its slow and bureaucratic response to being able to approve vaccinations for a pandemic, given its slow bureaucratic response to testing, given all these things that we've seen, and its slow response to adapting to new information to make new and better recommendations, can we trust it to handle the pandemics of the future? Are we going to end up with new diseases like monkeypox? Well, that one's not really new. We've known about it. We have a vaccine for it. We know how it works. Is the bureaucracy of the CDC going to get in the way of fighting that effectively? And are we going to end up with a new pandemic on our hands because of that? Are we going to see the new outbreak of polio happen because of that too? Are they up for the task? Gosh, I hope so. A lot of lives depend on them being up for the task, but I'm not sure that it makes sense to continue to have that be a branch of the federal government. It could be done by private organizations. All right, thanks again for joining us here on A Free Solution. Appreciate all the comments today. I'll get to a couple more when we get back. Thank you so much for listening. Again, give us a call if you want to participate in the show, 585-346-3000. That's 585-346-3000. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Talk to you soon.
Pray for the USA. AM 1040 Avon Rochester, FM 92.1 Rochester, and FM 95.5 Spencerport.
Here's the latest forecast from the Newstead NBC Weather Center for tonight. Mostly cloudy and muggy, will stay in the 60s. There will be the occasional shower, maybe a thundery downpour. On Tuesday, partly to mostly cloudy, still kind of humid. There will be a couple of showers, maybe a thunderstorm, but a lot of dry time as well. That'll be the last day of this unsettled weather. Then we'll dry it up. Sunshine back in the forecast, less humid. A nice day Wednesday in the low 80s. I'm Rich Cornelia, WYSL.
The summer celebration continues with new savings and selection waiting for you at Victor Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram, Anthony Drive off Route 96 in Victor. It's fun in the sun every day when you drive one of America's favorite four-wheel drive vehicles from Victor, like the 22 Jeep Cherokee Limited 4x4 in Diamond Black Crystal Pearl Coat, just $339 a month for 36 months. Must be returning lessee. The 2022 Ram 1500 Classic Warlock Quad Cab 4x4 pickup in Hydro Blue Pearl Coat is just $269 a month for 39 months. Must be Conquest lessee. The 22 Jeep Compass Latitude 4x4 is just $299 a month for 36 months. Must have Conquest or be returning lessee. First payment, DMV, taxes, and fees due at signing. Other conditions may apply. See dealer for details. We're here to fully serve Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram customers in Victor, Canandaigua, Macedon, Fairport, and throughout the Metro and Finger Lakes. Victor Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram, 6560 Anthony Drive in Victor.
Your business relies on computers and technology to operate. Slow, unreliable networks and servers can cause unplanned downtime and affect your bottom line. The experts at Simple Tech Innovations are here to help. Their preventative maintenance program ensures that your computers and network are kept up to date and monitored for any issues, keeping your business running smoothly. They also help clients achieve HIPAA, PCI, and New York State cybersecurity compliance to keep your network safe and secure. Whatever your business IT needs are, Simple Tech Innovations should be your first call. They've won the Best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. Call them today for a free consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. Simple Tech Innovations.
6 days after the firebombing of Compass Care's pro-life medical office in Buffalo, New York Governor Hochul callously signed a bill investigating the victims instead of the arsonists, referring to pro-life people as Neanderthals. The goal of the investigation is to pass more legislation restricting the activity of pregnancy centers simply because they do not provide abortion. Early in July, a pregnancy center state impact report for New York was released. It shows that in 2019, 84 pregnancy centers served over 26,000 people, giving away nearly $4 million worth of medical care and support. Compass Care CEO Jim Harden said, "Abortionists only provide abortion. It appears that Governor Hochul and the legislature need to look no further than pregnancy centers to find out who is actually providing for the unmet health and resource needs of women facing unplanned pregnancy." This RealAbortionNews.com update is sponsored by Compass Care.
Do you ever question how much value you get for the money you spend? Funerals can be expensive, and you should feel confident getting what you paid for. Bartolomeo and Prado Funeral Home promises to deliver. From expert guidance to a warm, inviting facility to handling all the details during a difficult time. Their priority is to create a meaningful tribute for your loved one and for you to feel that you spent wisely. When you're in need, call Bartolomeo and Prado Funeral Home, 720-6000.
An experienced professional with more than 15 years in dentistry, Dr. David Olivo welcomes new patients to his family practice at 2005 Lyle Avenue. At the office of Dr. Olivo, you'll discover a warm and comforting environment staffed by professionals who are committed to providing the best available dental care while assuring your complete comfort. Call 328-3382 for an appointment. Dr. David Olivo, offering quality dentistry with a gentle touch.
If you think today's gas prices are out of control, think what it might cost to heat your home this winter. Consider Air & More infrared zone heaters, which may save you up to 50% compared to using your furnace. Air & More zone heaters have no exposed hot surfaces, completely safe around pets and children, plus easy roll casters. And new copper PTC technology means no bulbs to replace ever. Save big on heating bills and stay comfy and healthy this winter. Buy direct and get lowest prices anywhere on the web. Call 800-707-8725 or visit air-more.com. This
a free solution on the WYSL stations.
Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson, your host today. Thanks again for joining us on this wonderful Monday afternoon. Give us a call if you want to participate in the show, 585-346-3000. That's 585-346-3000. And, of course, you can leave your comments online, too. And, get to a couple of these. So Paul on Facebook says, 50 years in government, referring to Dr. Fauci, no matter how educated and how well-meaning you are, would leave anyone out of touch with reality. Again, you're right. You kind of forget how real life works and how to communicate with normal folks. And I said that one of the things that rubbed me the wrong way about Dr. Fauci is starting to talk about like how he is the science and just kind of buying into his own myth. And that's something that bureaucrats and politicians do a little bit too much of. And again, it's going to be interesting to see. I imagine that Republicans are going to try to do some sort of investigation if they win the House and they win the Senate in the November elections. And we'll see if they try to do anything into that. If they continue to dig more into what happened in Wuhan, although I don't. With the gain of function research stuff, but I don't know if there's going to be anything more there or if there's going to be any, not liability is the right word, but accountability for Dr. Fauci if he is found to have knowingly allowed that sort of thing to happen despite U.S. policy to the contrary. And Tim O'Connor on Facebook. Again, Tim, him and I do an online only show on Thursday. This Thursday, we're gonna talk about the World Economic Forum. I know it's something that like callers bring up. It's something that Tim brings up occasionally, and been researching it, and so we'll talk about it. Good, bad, and ugly. What's going on with that stuff? Thursday night online only show. So make sure you follow the Free Solution page on Facebook if you want to listen to that and join in, ask questions, leave comments, etc. So just a couple more points to wrap up the whole CDC, public health, New York State stuff. Again, it's a matter of rebuilding trust with these public institutions. I would rather see the CDC move towards private organizations. Again, you could even have, I don't want government funding for it ideally, but you could still do that within that model, right? But you have an organization that can't go and try to get in the rent fixing game, right? Again, they issued these regulations under the Trump administration about rents and rent being a public health crisis. And they try to do this stuff all the time. And luckily, most of the time it gets shut down. But yeah, like keep it to guidance only. And again, they can tell you to do certain things, right? Like these are risk adverse people and they are looking at data and like what's perfectly safe, but we have to evaluate what risk is appropriate in our own lives, right? Like they also tell us things like, warning us about eating undercooked meat and sushi and all that stuff. I'm like, well, okay, sure. I realize that there is some risk in consuming my steak rare. But I'm willing to take that risk because I like the steak better that way. That is my choice. That is the risk I am willing to take to get more enjoyment out of my food because I don't want, to cook my food in that way. And they can provide that guidance all they want. That's what they should do. And people who want to understand the facts, they want to know what's going on, they can make that evaluation. Again, some meats I will eat rare. I'm not going to eat rare chicken or pork. That's not worth it to me. That's a bad idea. But I will do that for steak, particularly when I know where it comes from. Great. And the other thing that I would hope to see more of, again, more humbleness from politicians and public health officials, but politicians and bureaucrats generally, just acknowledging that people are going to do their own thing, even within the scope of guidance and mandates too. We saw a lot of that. Okay, so how do you deal with that? How do you deal with folks who are not going to listen to you, even when it genuinely is good advice, and it isn't always good advice? How do you deal with those folks? Do you deal with them through force, or do you deal with them by trying to sharpen your arguments? And then be humble enough to accept that maybe you do have bad or incomplete information and therefore may need to change. So if you beat people over the head with, your listen or else, listen or you're a moron type of arguments. Again, this is across the political spectrum. But if you tell people that, if you start to assume that people are dumb or irrational and you treat them as such, and you adopt this elite mentality of like, well, we know what's going on and you don't. Well, yeah, people are going to resent you for that. People are going to not want to listen to those folks. And when you turn out to be wrong and you wreck your trust, it's that much worse. So hopefully, and again, I'm not always an expert on this, but being able to communicate what you want effectively and with trust, and to be able to have people assume that you're acting in good faith is something that's tough to do, but just incredibly important for that type of thing. So I think it might just need to start over. Because again, most people don't know what's going on. Most people don't know what happens with all this stuff and disease prevention, and like including me. And I read about it all the time, so I could talk about it on the show. The listeners of this show are reading about it and what's going on, but the average person isn't paying attention to this. They're just living their lives, and if your one interaction with them is one that fosters mistrust and wrecks their lives, like, gosh, you got to get better. That's what we gotta hope. That's what we need to fight for. And so that's the type of reforms that I'd like to see in this. Again, accountability for folks who have shown no remorse, who pretend like they've done nothing wrong, who continue to harm people without accountability, like former Governor Cuomo. He didn't end up getting held accountable for his bad decisions about putting COVID positive patients in nursing homes and the bad policies related to that. Again, that's one of those things where, okay, you don't get the full benefit of the doubt there because some common sense could have told you that probably wasn't the best way to go, and a lot of people got hurt by it, not just economically hurt, but died, and that is a different level. And again, it's not about giving them the benefit of the doubt all the time when it's the level of hurt people are, the number of people who died because of your policies. Politicians get essentially, qualified immunity for that stuff. Like they don't get held accountable in a legal sense in so many cases of bad policy, like genuinely hurting people, because we treat policies carried out by government differently than we do actions carried out by individuals. But maybe we shouldn't in every case. Really, again, with some COVID response policies pretty bad. Again, with Governor Hochul, I think on the education policy, it should have happened a lot sooner. And I'd like to think that voters would say, yeah, we're going to hold her accountable in the November elections, but I'm not really holding my breath for that. Given polling, given past history, I'm going to vote for Larry Sharpe, but yeah, there's a lot of people who still like her, and this is going to solidify her base of Democrat support who might be frustrated with her if they carried through the educational policies related to COVID that were frustrating a lot of parents who go out and vote. This is calming those folks down and getting them to say, see, she came around. It's fine. What are you guys even complaining about? that's how it goes. Again, I want there to be room for forgiveness. I want there to be room for doing the right thing. I want there to be genuine reform. I want there to be some level of accountability, though, when we when they take too long or they continue to carry out bad policies despite all evidence. Tim O'Connor on Facebook asks, "What are our choices?" Hochul wins. Period. Love Larry. We'll vote for him. Yeah, that's kind of what it is. Again, it's tough to hold people accountable when the only mechanism that average people have for holding politicians accountable is the ballot box. And in a state like New York, that's difficult, even for folks who are in that position. And then other folks, right? There's that degree of separation. There's the folks who were appointed by politicians, and at the state level, like public health officials, at the federal level, folks like Dr. Fauci, at and the head of the CDC and all that. At the local level, it's the chief of police. It's in other bureaucrats and system. There's all these folks who have not only a distant accountability for the politicians themselves, but then the folks who are in the bureaucracy who make things run. You've just got to hope that you're not enough of a PR and electoral liability to the politician or legal liability to the politician that you get booted out of office. Otherwise, you'll stay in, unfortunately. Sometimes there's shakeups, after elections, but that's part of it, right? And again, I don't have a good solution other than, you can yell about it. You can vote differently. You can not comply if you so choose, although you'll face consequences for not complying with whatever lawful order comes from government. That's what you could do, but that's civil disobedience. You could face consequences for that. So it's very hard to keep those types of folks accountable. And this is another comment from Tim to Lee Zeldin, who's the Republican candidate for governor, would handle education exactly like Hochul. We're so close it would be hard to tell the difference. I don't know about that. Now, I'll have to invite Congressman Zeldin on the show to talk about that. I'd love to ask him about his education stuff. And that'll be a subject for a future show. All right, but thanks again for joining us here on A Free Solution. When we come back, I'm going to change topics a little bit. Talk about the Stop Woke Act and some other things. But, of course, give us a call if you want to participate. 585-346-3000. That's 585-346-3000. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Talk to you soon.
Why do businesses choose to move their website from Wix and Squarespace to SimpleTech Innovations? Maybe it's their excellent customer service or attention to detail. Maybe it's their ability to give a truly customized solution. Or perhaps they just like the fact that SimpleTech is a local small business that builds great relationships with its clients. Whatever the reason may be, you can rest assured knowing that the local team at SimpleTech has your best interest in mind when building or updating your website. They're hands-on and love helping customers achieve their goals. But don't take my word for it. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. If your website doesn't match your dreams or isn't achieving your goals, give the professionals at SimpleTech Innovations a call today for a consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. SimpleTech Innovations.
Hey, this is Kevin Wilson, host of A Free Solution. You ever need a tool for just one project, but didn't want to spend the cash for something you'd use just once or twice? Well, there's a new tool library in Rochester where you can borrow just the thing you need instead of buying a new one. It's called the Tool Shed from the Southeast Area Coalition, and membership starts at just $25 a year. Use it for home projects or to support your business. Learn more and become a member at seektoolshed.org. That's SEAC toolshed.org.
Hi, Bob Savage here with a boost and good news for business owners and managers. We know it's been tough sledding with government working against you post-pandemic, so we've come up with a low-cost ad package, and for a limited time, once you're a WYSL advertiser, we'll run a bonus that's free extra schedule for job openings you're trying to fill. We'll feature your business and describe the positions you have open, all at absolutely no charge. At the WYSL stations, we're not just the voice of liberty, we're the small business friend. Call 346-3000 for details. All major credit cards welcome.
A free solution on the WYSL stations.
Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson, your host today. Thank you so much for joining us here on this wonderful Monday afternoon. Give us a call if you want to participate in the show, 585-346-3000. That's 585-346-3000. And, again, leave your comments online as well. Got one more from Patty on Facebook who says, "Right in, Larry Sharp." Yeah, sure. That's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to switch topics a little bit. We've talked about the CDC in New York State and all that. We've talked about this a lot. I would love to hear more comments about how do we keep folks accountable in a meaningful way. And again, it's tough to do in a democracy when so many folks wanted to see those policies happen initially, right? Like they're responding to those voter incentives initially, and then a bunch of folks realize, like, hey, this no longer makes sense, and then government is very slow to react. Politics kind of follows culture, and you'll see that the state is going to react to the needs of voters on a pretty delayed timeline. When we see that with all sorts of policies, and it's a matter of and continue to talk about this and make sure that politicians, bureaucratic decision makers, and others know like the importance of this stuff, both communication and setting good policy, and then having some mechanism for keeping people accountable, at the very least elections, but finding other ways to do that too would be important. Again, I don't know exactly what that is yet, but we're gonna switch gears a little bit, because this is something I talked about on a show a few months ago. There's the Stop Woke Act in Florida. Again, one of those laws that rubs me the wrong way a little bit, just because you knew it was going to be unconstitutional. You knew it was going to be an issue. It was done as legislative virtue signaling. I don't think that there was. I don't know that I believe that there was any serious intention to have this carry through and become real policy, right? So it's also called the Individual Freedom Act. It would have banned schools and businesses from teaching or training students or employees a list of stuff related to critical race theory, right? And yeah, you can't. It's a free speech thing. You can't do that. You got to let people do what they want. And at schools, you got a little bit more control over, like just a tiny bit, but from the state level, which is a problem with education itself, where the state can dictate what you can or cannot teach in any regard, ends up being fraught with political liabilities and problems, which is why I want to do what I can to exit the education system. But again, you can't ban employers from doing bad CRT, like racial sensitivity and racial justice trainings. Again, and I've seen these, I've sat through them before. That a lot of them are, in some cases good, but in a lot of cases just really bad and destructive. and some of the stuff I just didn't like about them is just the kind of putting people into boxes based on skin color and assuming behaviors around folks in a way that wasn't necessarily accurate, nor did it take into account all of the diversity that makes that person who they were, right? So I don't like the narrow focus on race in these situations, and I think a lot of other people don't like it either. Fine, we could talk all day about what does or doesn't make sense in these types of things, but should you as a private employer either have to do a program like this or be prohibited from doing a program like this. No, it doesn't. Again, this is a way to go after your cultural enemies. You shouldn't be able to prohibit someone from being able to do a racial justice training, a training that is too woke for your opinion. You shouldn't be able to prohibit that. Employers should be able to do what they want, and then you, as the employee, can, raise a stink about it. If you don't like it, you can find a new job. You can start a public discussion about it, like I said. But should you get the state to go in and ban it? No, you shouldn't. That's not how this stuff works. And conservatives too often are turning to the same arguments that Democrats are doing. Well, again, this stuff is too dangerous to be kept around. It's too toxic. It's discriminatory against my beliefs. Now, again, I hear you, but do you really want the state getting involved in stuff? Do you really want to open the door for the state to be able to regulate what speech can take place in your private business even more than they already have? Because this is to open it further. That's what it does. And again, I know they tried to challenge it on the civil rights ruling and stuff, but no, it doesn't. It doesn't fit into the very narrow scope of stuff that gets limited under the Civil Rights Act. That's not how that works. But we don't want progressives to be able to do the other thing. Like, again, the reason why I find this important, right? The reason why I think this is important and why libertarians in particular, but small government conservatives should pay attention to this stuff and be wary of legislation that tries to regulate speech in the workplace is because it will get flipped. Because if it did get through, if it did, for whatever reason, make it through the courts in Florida, make it all the way up to the Supreme Court, and we decide that was an acceptable regulation of speech, what is going to happen next? If you're able to, at the state level, to make those sorts of determinations about what speech is or isn't allowed in training programs at your state, again, this is separate from discriminatory practices in certain, things like harassment, which has specific definitions, and other discrimination that can exist in workplaces that is banned by other legislation. If you allow that expansion into what the woke people that you're trying to fight, what they want to do, and their reasons for wanting to cancel people, which exists right now as a private form of sometimes self-censorship, sometimes censorship by the mob, sometimes censorship by companies who are worried about PR issues. If that was allowed to be codified and put into a state level where the state is able to come in and intervene and use violence in those situations, that is actually dangerous. That is scary. Again, there's enough issues with woke culture being used to just kind of perpetuate ridiculous and nitpicky arguments around certain discussions, which sometimes I'm sympathetic to. Other times I'm like, nah, y'all being ridiculous. But I don't want the state getting involved in that. That should be hashed out in the private sphere. That's how it is now. That's where it should be. We can have these discussions. We can make these arguments. We can try to convince people that we're right in one direction or the other. The moment you introduce the element of violence into it, the moment you introduce the state into it, the moment you threaten a business from being able to operate legally within a state, not just threaten, bad PR and customers ignoring you and whatever, right? Like, again, that is a different situation. The moment you threaten their ability to operate at all with state violence, you are operating on a whole different level. And that's something that we need to fight back about. That's something that we need to stop. That's the real threat to free speech. So I'm going to continue watching this. We'll see what appeals happen. We'll see what other legislation comes through. And I don't know. Again, I see threats to free speech from both the left and the right. And we got to keep fighting the important cultural battles while preserving the core elements of free speech. And appreciate y'all joining us today. I will be back on Wednesday. Have a wonderful, wonderful week, folks. Take care.